This is the video lecture for both lessons 24 and 25 in Clayton Croy's A Primer to Biblical Greek. In this video lecture, we will discuss the form and syntax of the infinitive, indirect discourse, and what I am calling nightmare nouns. To begin with a brief review of the infinitive, remember that the infinitive is a verbal noun. Like a verb, it has tense and voice, but not person or number. As a verb, it can have a subject, a direct object, or an indirect object. And it's worth pointing out here that the subject of the infinitive will be in the accusative case. So will the direct object be in the accusative case, which can make working with the infinitives a little bit ambiguous, but eventually we can get the hang of it. As a verbal noun, the infinitive has tense, and tense denotes kind of action, not necessarily time of action. So a present tense infinitive will denote linear action. An aorist tense infinitive will denote undefined action, and the perfect tense infinitive will denote completed action with a continuing result. The infinitive is used to express purpose, result, time, or cause. Like a noun, the infinitive may be either the subject or the direct object of a sentence. So here are the forms of the infinitive in one chart, with the present, aorist, and perfect tenses in the columns, and the active, middle, and passive voices in the rows. And so you'll notice that in the present tense, the middle and passive are identical, luesthai. In the aorist, you'll notice the presence of the sigma alpha, which we've become very accustomed to in the aorist, and that the middle and the passive are not identical, and that theta eta, which is a clear marker of the aorist passive, is also present in the aorist passive infinitive. Notice that with the perfect tense, we have reduplication throughout, which is a key identifier of the perfect tense. We have the kappa in the active voice. And again, like the present tense, the middle and passive are identical in form. So I've tried to highlight with the different font colors here some of those distinguishing markers. The red markers are really an indicator of the voice that is in mind, and the brown color here denotes the tense that is in mind. We've already learned one way in which the infinitive can be used in a sentence, and that's the complementary function. It is when the infinitive is used to complete the meaning of other verbs. So de, dunamai, thelo, melo, and other similar verbs. In addition to that complementary function, the infinitive can also function like a noun. So it can function as the subject of the sentence. So, kalan estin terrain tas entolas tu theou. We would translate this as, it is good to keep the commands of God, or keeping the commands of God is good. In both cases, the phrase teren tas entolas tu theou is the subject. But the infinitive can also be used as the direct object of the sentence. So, hoi Andres, hoi poneroi, ezetun apaktenai tan prophetein. And we will translate this as, the evil men were seeking to kill the prophet. Here, if we asked, what were the evil men seeking? What is the direct object we are asking? Apaktenai tan prophetein would be the answer. What are they seeking? To kill the prophet. The infinitive can also have verb-like functions. Often this will require a formation known as the articular infinitive. And this is when the definite article precedes the infinitive. Like verbs, the infinitive can be used to express purpose, often with the preposition eis or pros. It can express result, often with the preposition hoste. Or it can express time with pra, en, or meta. And here it's worth pointing out that time can be prior time, something before. It can be simultaneous, something happening during. Or it can be subsequent, something happening after. And you can see how that relates to the three prepositions, pra, which means before, en, which means in or during, and meta, which means after. And finally, the infinitive can be used to express cause, often with the preposition dia plus the accusative, on account of. Now let's move to the second topic for this lecture, indirect discourse. So to begin with, what is indirect discourse? Well, it is reporting of speech or of a thought or of a perception in a dependent clause. So direct discourse would use quotation marks. The teacher said, comma, quotation marks, take out your books. Instead, indirect discourse would use that instead to make it dependent. So the teacher said that it was necessary to take out their books, would be an example. Greek retains the tense and mood of the original discourse. What we would imagine of direct discourse is retained in indirect discourse. And you'll see several examples of this in section 172 on pages 147 through 148. At this point in the course, I simply want to introduce you to indirect discourse and provide this reference to where you can come back and see some of the suggestions for translating as you encounter this in Greek reading in the future. Finally, Lesson 25 introduces three new types of third declension nouns, which I'm calling nightmare nouns. You'll remember that third declension nouns already had trouble following any sort of discernible patterns, and these new forms are even more difficult to discern. And so they are difficult to recognize, and they may appear to be forms that they are not. So they actually may be like false positives, which is not helpful. And so as a strategy, I recommend that you memorize the nominative and the genitive forms as we did with other third declension nouns. And here, when in doubt, look it up. Look into your lexicon, look into the glossary in the back of the textbook, or use your Greek Reader's Edition of the New Testament as you're in the New Testament. In addition to these nouns, Lesson 25 also introduces adjectives that are declined according to third declension nouns in all genders. Again, this is simply for you to have as a reference. It is not essential for you to sort of have a firm grasp of this concept. It's simply enough for you to know what it is and begin with some of the educated guesses to find what those adjectives are modifying. Finally, I want to get started with the first practice and review exercise from Lesson 24. Sumen leges, uk existin ergasiste in sabato, ute therapeusai, hemeste thelomen anoixa tus ophthalmus ton tuflon. So as I have done with previous lectures, I want to point out some of the new concepts that we've learned in this lecture. The first are the infinitives. And so you'll see that we have two infinitives in the first part of this sentence. They both follow existing, and therefore they are complementary. They are complementing or completing the idea of existing, which means it is necessary. And so ergasiste is present deponent infinitive, and therapeusai is aorist active infinitive. And here I've tried to highlight those forms, the red indicating the middle passive, and the sigma alpha indicating the aorist, and the I indicating that we are in the active as well. So again, these are forms of the infinitive or a use of the infinitive that you've already seen in past lessons. We also have another one in the second part of the sentence, thelomen anoixai, which is also an aorist active infinitive and also a complementary infinitive. We want to open is how we would translate that phrase. And that's from anoigo. And so this is one of those weird verbs where when we add the sigma, it actually results in a new letter. But the round font there points out that you're in the aorist, as well as the alpha points out that you're in the aorist, and then that iota indicates that you are in the active voice. So we would parse this as an aorist active infinitive. All right, this is a example of direct discourse. So we have su leges uk ... So we would translate this as you say, comma, and then uk existing, and what follows is the actual direct quotation. That's in distinction to indirect discourse, which he learned about in this lesson. So from this, there is probably enough information for us to get to a translation. On the one hand, you say, it is not permitted to do work on the Sabbath, nor to heal. But on the other hand, we want to open the eyes of the blind. And so you'll see that I've used these parentheticals to indicate the on the one hand, on the other hand, that is suggested by the men de construction. And I would like for you to bring that out as you recognize it. You may decide, as I did with this translation, that it's somewhat unnecessary, and so put it in parentheses just to indicate that it is there. That is the end of this lecture on lessons 24 and 25. Thank you for your attention.